Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Physician's Mind podcast. I'm your host, Curtis Wilkerson, and I designed this show in order to engage the curious mind and help optimize your journey of lifelong learning and self-improvement in medicine and beyond. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Kyle Stephenson. Dr. Kyle Stephenson is a sports medicine orthopedic surgeon, an educator, and the host of the Assets in Orthopedics podcast, where he empowers physicians and high-income professionals to embrace the strategies of legacy-driven wealth creators through strategic investing and tax optimization. He also serves as a spokesman for Conscious Keto, promoting health and longevity. As a former assistant team doctor for the Boston Celtics, Dr. Stephenson has worked with elite athletes, gaining unparalleled insight into the financial and professional complexities of high-performance individuals. His unique expertise in both medicine and financial strategy equips him to guide others toward achieving lasting wealth and balance. Based in Indianapolis, Indiana, Dr. Stephenson is a seasoned real estate investor with a diversified portfolio across multifamily housing, hospitality, and self-storage. He also started Legacy RX Mentorship, where he inspires others to align their careers with their values and build impactful, purpose-driven legacies guided by faith, fitness, family, finances, and future self. At the heart of it all, Dr. Stephenson is a devoted husband to his wife, Andrea. How you doing, sir?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, let's just dive right into it here, Dr. Stephenson. Will you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, family life, kids, hobbies, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah. So from Indianapolis, Indiana, born and raised here. I practice orthopedic surgery here local. I got away. After high school, I wanted to go as far away as possible from Indianapolis. Becomes a small town to a degree, a small big city, if you will. And so I was going to go play baseball and football in college, somewhere cool, somewhere on the coast or south. And I ended up going 20 minutes away from my parents' house, played both baseball and football, full ride scholarship, so I couldn't pass it up. So then for medical school, I went down to Bradenton, Florida, got away there. And then I did my residency up at Michigan State, where you are. Met my wife there. Go Sparty. And then I did a fellowship in Boston and at New England Baptist, where we work with the Celtics, Harvard, and Merrimack. And then, came back to Indianapolis, Indiana. I was here for 4 years when I first got back. And it was COVID time. My wife and I had our first son, and we got spooked. I got, that feeling again where I was like, I feel like I'm stuck. And I know that if we stay here long enough, our kid's going to be in school, then we really can't leave. So we decided let's go either Florida or South Carolina. We went to Charleston, South Carolina, took a job there, and loved it. Had our daughter out there. And then we were due with our son down there, realized that we had no family around. Her family's from Michigan, mine's from Indianapolis. My kids had, 14 cousins on my side and 8 cousins on her side, and we were the only ones down there. We're like, all right, we love the weather. Let's get back to Indianapolis, be close to family. And we're back here and we love it. I'm doing real estate investing as well as, practicing medicine and just absolutely loving life, man.
Nice. That's the journey right there. I think there's an interesting story about how you met your wife. Do you mind sharing that with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So in residency, Michigan State, of course, one of my attendings, Dr. Flood, had a resident party every single year for the residents, of course. And I was a second-year resident. And I went to the Michigan State football game that day. So I was feeling pretty good, went with a couple buddies probably and had a couple beers. And I think I was at that level where I was like not drunk where people would notice it, but drunk enough to where I had liquid courage. We'll call it that. And so, Dr. Flood had a party. His twin daughters were there. One was married, one recently married. The other one was single. And I did everything I could to stay in the kitchen and talk to the girls. And had a couple dates with her. Things went well, and then I hadn't told him yet, and I was a second-year resident, so I had to get on his service here soon. He was a spine surgeon, and I was about to start his service, so I was like, I need to have this conversation before I start. It's going to be awkward. Called him. I was on call. I had 3 messages for him. Told him the first one was a patient up on the floor of his. Second one was a patient in the ER, and then I stopped, and he's like, what was that third one? And I said, well, I got to tell you, I've been going out with your daughter, and I would like to get your approval. And he said, absolutely, you're a good guy. And as long as she's happy, I'm happy. And sure enough, everything went very well. My resident buddies told me you're the dumbest guy in the world. But everything went perfect, and we got married. And he actually, obviously spoke at our wedding. And it was just neat story. And there we go. I don't recommend it for everybody, of course, but.
Nice. Always be ready, though, because you never know when you're going to have to ask your attending if you can go out with their daughter.
It will get you out of your shell. No question.
No doubt.
You can sell to anybody if you can sell to your not only your boss but your future father-in-law.
Exactly. You just have to be ready. You got to be in tip-top shape for that. Now, a couple questions for you, Dr. Stephenson. Why did you end up going to medical school in Florida? And did you always know you wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon?
So I always knew I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. Sports medicine, orthopedics. I tell the story that, I grew up playing football and baseball, and I wanted to be the shortstop for the Chicago Cubs. And my plan B was to be the team doctor for the Chicago Cubs. And I made too many errors at shortstop, so I had to be a doctor, I guess. And so sports medicine was always my love, always my passion. I knew I was going to go to medical school. There was no physicians in my family. My dad was a businessman. My mom stayed at home and raised 6 kids. So I was the first in my family to go to medical school, which is cool. So that was it. That's all I was going to do. And people always ask, and in your interview process, what's your plan B? I said, I don't have a plan B. I'm doing this no matter what. Now, with that being said, in undergrad, I played baseball and football. I got good grades. I did well. I thought I was a shoo-in for medical school. I'll put it that way. And I interviewed with IU. I only applied to a couple of schools my first year, only to MD schools. And I interviewed with IU, didn't get in. They basically waitlisted me and said, retake the MCAT. And I was like, okay, well, I'll go get my master's degree. There's like a program that kind of was a feeder into medical school. So I did that and got the highest grade in the class. Came back to interview again. They said, you didn't retake your MCAT. And I said, no, but I beat all these people who will likely get into this class. And I got waitlisted again. So I heard about DO programs, applied, got in, and I got into multiple different schools. But Sarasota, Florida was just fantastic. Sarasota, Bradenton. Couldn't pass that up. I loved it. It was PBL, problem-based learning. So it was only like 2 hours a day for 5 days. And the rest of the time, you could go to the beach, the pool, hang out. And that was a blessing for me because I didn't want to sit in a classroom lecture-based, for 8 hours a day. I was more like independent learning. I succeeded. The best thing that ever happened to me was to get waitlisted at IU because I think it put a chip on my shoulder. I still took the USMLE along with the COMLEX my first year, step 1, and got 99th percentile on both. And the only thing that did for me is just gave me the confidence knowing, okay, I can compete with all these people. I just didn't get into IU. But again, put a chip on my shoulder, and it was number 1 in my class in medical school, and absolutely I flourished with the problem-based learning. So for anybody out there that's going to medical school and wants to learn more about problem-based learning, I would look up schools that do it because it was just an awesome way to learn, independent learning, and I felt like made me a better student.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Do you know much about it?
No, I've actually never really heard of it. I mean, I'd imagine you're presented with maybe a symptom and then they base your education off of that.
There you go. That's it. Yeah. So literally like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you have 2-hour sessions with a small group. You have one attending or one physician in there, teacher. And they present like, this person, 67-year-old has, chest pain. And then you do the whole like differential diagnosis. And then you talk about the things it could be. And then you have chapters that you'll read for the next time that will relate to the heart and, pharmacology, physiology, like they all come together. It's all system-based to a degree, but you're kind of doing independent learning where you read a lot on your own, then you come together as a group and discuss it. And then your tests were like every 6 weeks. So then it became like a bigger test that you took, which is got you ready more for the boards, I think, as opposed to a bunch of small tests per subject. So I just thought it got me ready, for orthopedics, but everybody learns differently. And I think there were people that struggled with that process as well. They needed the more lecture-based where I flourished. So for me, it was good.
Okay. And, I know the big talk, because what year did you graduate medical school?
2012.
2012. Okay. Because a lot of the talk I hear today about USMLE or board exam performance is kind of based on active recall, utilizing Anki, UWorld, all these different online programs with like a distinct plan. Was it pretty similar for your preparation in order to score so well, or what were some of your strategies there?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Yeah, the first test I took, gosh, what was that? So yeah, step 1, I did more reading, less questions, and I did well. And then step 2, I even did better, which is crazy, but I just did all questions. I was done with like the reading the books and stuff like that. Literally all questions, because you'll get pretty much every subject, or every question a couple different times, a couple different ways. And then step 3, everybody does well, but same thing, all questions. So any advice I would give, obviously you study for medical school, study for your tests, but then when you're preparing for boards, question, nonstop.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's endless resources for students too, who need more detailed information on that. So before we dive into your financial endeavors, let's just cover a few more things on your medical journey here. So in medical school and in residency, respectively, what were the biggest challenges that you faced and how did you overcome those challenges?
Man, I mean, the biggest thing before medical school, I just mentioned is not getting in. And so you figure out a path, right? Like I went to DO school. I didn't go to DO school because I thought DOs were better than MDs. I went because I didn't get into MD school. But now I will tell you that majority of patients actually search for a DO a lot of times. So I'm proud of it. Michigan State is a great medical school for DOs. But yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong either way. So challenges in medical school, I flourished in medical school. I actually loved medical school more than I liked undergrad, which is crazy because I had fun. Yep, I enjoyed it. Definitely, you're around like-minded people, guys and gals that they all want the same dream, the same journey that you want to go on. So, you're all pushing each other to get better. I would stay, because we had the 2 hours a day of class, you get to hang out with your friends a little bit more. We would stay at school, me and my buddy, and we would whiteboard pretty much all day and night. And then, this sounds bad, but we were in Sarasota, Florida. So about 10 o'clock at night, we'd be done. We'd all go out to the bars, have a good time, enjoy Florida. And then, class didn't start again until like 10 a.m. the next day. So we had a good time. We lived it up. We played hard. We worked hard. We played maybe a little harder, but I loved it. And so there was one story in medical school, and a lot of my classmates would know this, but I was getting pressure from other students that didn't really know me all that well. They knew I would go out and have a good time, and they thought I was number one in the class. And there was rumors going around that I was cheating. Because I was number one, I would also go out and have a good time, right? So what they didn't know is that we were there, all hours of the day and night studying, and then we'd go out. And I said, hey, you guys can look at the tapes. You guys know I'm studying. And then you would do a one of those diagnostic tests or whatever where you can't like really study for it. It just tests your cerebral. It's kind of like a, standardized test, basically. And I would do well on that. So there was no way you could cheat for that, if you will.
Yeah.
So I was able to prove it. But that was probably the biggest thing is like, that rumor started going around a little bit, and I was like, okay. Advice to people going through medical school is embrace it. Embrace the challenge. It's enjoyable, but I would definitely team up with classmates, study with friends, and make it enjoyable. It's your life for not only just those 4 years of medical school, residency. I'm pretty sure you're called a resident because you reside at the hospital. So you really just have to enjoy it. It's a cool journey to go on, and you're doing it with like-minded people. You'll find your crew and have a good time. Challenges in residency. Orthopedic surgery residency is difficult. I think that every doctor probably thinks that their residency was the hardest. That could be true. There's late nights, there's call, there's, this, that, and the other. But again, it's preparing you to be the best doctor you can be. And I think now as an attending, like nothing really phases you because as a resident, you go through so much. And I know that the hours now are a lot better than what we went through. They were starting to change that my senior year. But yeah, you have late nights. My girlfriend at the time, my now wife, she can tell you plenty of stories when I was on call. You live 5 minutes from the hospital, and you'd go take care of everything, reduce an ankle fracture. You get back home, put your head to bed, and literally get a phone call, and you're like, "Are you kidding me?" You got to go right back in. Sometimes it's easier just to stay at the hospital because you just get those frustrating nights. You fall asleep standing up sometimes when you're in the OR with your attending. I don't know. Some of that may be going away because there's hour restrictions and all that. But again, there's challenges that you'll face, but they're good challenges. They make you better for the future. And you will be doing those with friends and colleagues and like-minded individuals.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful journey. And it's like, I'm sure you'll agree with this. Some of the most challenging experiences we have in life, in turn, end up being the most meaningful.
Absolutely. That's it.
All right. That's good advice there. Good advice and interesting experiences both in medical school and residency. Moving on to some of your current endeavors. You have a podcast called Assets and Orthopedics. What's that all about?
Yeah. So I started getting into real estate investing in 2020, 2021, more passive, limited partner deals. And then I would say, and I was reading Robert Kiyosaki books, nonstop in residency. I was reading a lot of books and just never really took action. I thought my action taking was, let's just be a limited partner in deals, hand my money over, not have a clue what's going on with that money. And but then when I made the move from Indianapolis to Charleston, between my first and second job, I had like 3 months off in between. When you're not in the daily grind, your mind could just go wild. And I felt like I just started being a dreamer at that point. I was like, all right, I need to take action. Tom Burns' book, Why Doctors Don't Get Rich. And that on top of all the Robert Kiyosaki books, I think really like leveraged me or pushed me to start doing something. So I started getting into real estate investing. And then I didn't think there was a ton of physicians in real estate investing. Now I see it everywhere I go, right? I know a ton of physicians that are doing real estate investing, but a lot of it is because I started the podcast and I did it more selfishly. I wanted to get information out there for physicians, but also doing it selfishly to challenge myself to learn more. I want to bring on the biggest experts to learn from. And that's what I've done. It's been a year and a half now. And, I pretty much handpick who comes on the show. There's 1,000 people that will hit you up, and I'm sure you get this too, where their VAs, the virtual assistants will hit you up, say, hey, this person will be good for your podcast. This person's good. And I say no to everybody unless I choose them myself, because I want it to be organic and, and meaningful.
Right. Especially once you get more established. In the beginning, at least for me, I was like, yeah, come on, anybody. But now that it's more established, you have that luxury of kind of picking and choosing who fits the criteria. Absolutely.
That's right. Yep.
So awesome. Yeah, definitely a podcast, great way to learn, great way to network. As we discussed previously, you meet a lot of people, you learn a lot. And then it's really, I have yet to find a lose for a podcast. I mean, it's really just a win-win-win all around the board. Yeah, it takes a little time, but you're learning, you're talking to people, you're meeting new people. It's a great thing. I've yet to find anything that's negative about having a podcast.
Yep. And with that being said, excuse me, when I first started it, I read that like 90% of podcasters don't go past episode 2. And so maybe that's changed, but that's a big deal, So for you, like to get past those first few, not a lot of people can say that.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. And likewise, I think that I have heard similar things. Like a lot of them fizzle out at the end of the day. A lot of them just fizzle out. So you just got to be consistent and good quality. That's the key. So, well, since you started that financial journey now, what are some of the most valuable things that you've learned about accumulating positive cash flowing assets? What are some of your preferred vehicles of income or investment? And how did paying off your student loan debt play into this? And anything else you wanted to add there?
Yeah. So I'm a W-2 employee, like a lot of people, I think now. And so, you have to find ways to minimize your taxes. That's really what I got into real estate from the get-go, is because I was tired of paying taxes. With COVID, I didn't agree with a lot of the things the government was doing. And instead of complaining about it, I was like, what are ways I can minimize my taxes to the government? So my CPA, he's like, nah, you make too much money. So I was diving deep, trying everything. I was like, do I own a business? Do I get a franchise? Literally, we were trying everything, my wife and I. And then finally, real estate hit me, and I was like, duh, that's the best way we can minimize our taxes. It's intuitive to me. I like it better than gas and oil. And so I love talking about real estate. So yeah, real estate investing, I have single family homes here in Indy. I have a triplex here in Indy, Airbnbs, and then I also do a lot more commercial properties now. So I have multifamily, self-storage. We have a couple of hotels down in Louisiana, and then we're actually doing a capital raise right now. I partnered up with some friends here, local, 6th fastest growing city in the country, and we're doing a development deal down the street from my hospital, actually, which is really cool. So I'm helping raise money on that. So yeah, I've been doing real estate now and loving that, and that's bringing passive income. But, my job is still the number one priority, right? Like that's bringing the majority of my money. I do think that financial freedom, that term, has been overused, and I think it's a buzzword that just, brings people in. But, the more I learn about this stuff and the more I have a podcast out there and I talk to other physicians who are in real estate investing, these last 4 years have not been like the most lucrative in real estate. Now it will, once the market calms back down, or if interest rates go down, then it's going to be boom. It's going to blow up in real estate again. And so I like getting into it at that time where the market was not ideal, because that's when you get discounts on plenty of properties, right? But those guys like Vikram Raya and other physicians that are very successful who got in 2010 to 2019, like that's when the market was just going nonstop. You could have got any multifamily and made good money on it. These last 4 years, the people that are still in real estate are in it because they understand the market, understand, actually how to do it. Yeah. So long-winded question or long-winded answer. But yeah, real estate, I do love. The tax benefits are great. There's short-term rental tax loophole, which we could talk about. There's real estate professional status, which we could talk about. I don't know how much these are mentioned out in the media necessarily, but ultimately, you asked about my podcast, and ultimately with clarity, I want for physicians is not the buzzwords of financial freedom, not the, what everybody else is doing necessarily. I want physicians to really start thinking like the ultra wealthy. And the reason for that is the ultra wealthy and investors don't pay much in taxes, if any in taxes. Physicians pay a ton of money in taxes. Interest rates, or a lot of ultra wealthy people become their own bank. And that's actually possible. There's a thing called infinite banking concept, which I've been diving really deep into as of late since I had Brent Kessler on my podcast. And now I got some policies that we're using. You can use it to buy, pay off your debt, i.e., cars or house, whatever, or you can use it to invest in real estate. And so that's a cool concept. Gosh, what are other ways? I'm a spokesman for a Conscious Keto. It's a joint supplement company. That's pretty cool. And I got asked to do that a year and a half ago or so. And now I make royalties on the sale of this thing, which is awesome. So I think, as physicians, we have worked hard. We can leverage our expertise, our credentials to do a lot of cool things because we have power. We have, we can make an impact bigger than just our patients, I think, even.
Yeah, well said. And, that's a perfect segue into kind of my next question here. Why do you think it's so important for physicians nowadays to also get involved in some entrepreneurial endeavors, right? Because the whole premise behind this show is to offer people, particularly in the medical field, but also beyond, tools to enhance their well-being in life and to enhance, in this case, their financial status, so to speak. So why do you think it's so important for physicians to look into these kind of things?
Yeah, times have changed a lot. 20 years ago, physicians were making money hand over fist. They didn't need anything else. And, with the government, insurance companies, everything else, we're being squeezed down, even hospitals. We're being squeezed down. Our income's going down every year. Inflation goes up every year, and we're not even keeping up with inflation. I have a stat I said on my podcast. I think it's like over the last 20 years, inflation went up 50%. Our income only went up 10%. So if you're not thinking outside the box, then you're getting taken advantage of by hospitals. 75% of physicians nowadays are employed by somebody. And even if you're a part of a private group, you're merging or getting eaten up by somebody else, whether it's private equity or a hospital. So everybody is losing that entrepreneurial mindset if you just continue to just be a physician. Now, burnout's extremely high, right? And you wonder why. When I got into being the reason we wanted to be doctors, for the most part, I can't speak for everybody, but for myself, you want control, you want some, respect to the community, you want to make good money, you want to make a big positive impact on people in your community. There's a lot of good things to it, of course, but if you just want to make an impact and make people happy, you can go volunteer. You can go be a nurse. There's other things you can do to make people happy, to make an impact. I think being a physician, we also want to make good money and be successful. We all dreamed of a nice house and a nice car and all these things. Well, the Parkinson's law says that, your expenses will catch up to your income. And that's pretty much what happens if you just live paycheck to paycheck as a, employed physician. So I think everybody out there needs to think outside the box, become a physician because, we are still well respected. We still make good money, but you can use that to do other things outside of medicine or within medicine in other realms. But there's so much money out there. And the government printed off like 40% of all the money in the last 4 years. So there's a ton of money out there. Hospitals aren't going to give it to us. Hospitals might be getting it, but they're not going to give it to physicians. So if you're not thinking outside the box and working as an entrepreneur, doing real estate investing where you can minimize your taxes and make some passive income, I'm a spokesman for this joint supplement company. And I make royalties on it. And they pay me to fly out to New York, to Tampa, to all these places to film. And it's fun. It's creative, gets me out of the house. So yeah, long-winded answer again, but I just think that more docs need to be thinking like this. You're not going to just be in your practice for the next 30 years and think that your life's going to be good.
No, these long-winded answers are good answers. They're substantial answers, and it's what we need to hear. Do you have any other advice for maybe a young medical student who is aspiring to not only be a great physician, but also live this great lifestyle with stable financial situation, some entrepreneurial endeavors, a good physician, balanced career where they're going to work because they want to, not because they need the paycheck, right? What advice do you have for somebody who wants to live independent of their paycheck as a physician?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, man, do what you're doing, Curtis. You're thinking outside the box. When I told you to read a couple books, you bought those books literally immediately. I tell any young person this, and I wish I did it, but I didn't. I read medical books. But if you can read actual books, self-help, business, entrepreneurial books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, and then go from there and just start reading books that make you think, you will get ahead of like 99% of people because most people on a Sunday are sitting there watching NFL games, watching Netflix for hours, acting like they're busy. And if you're listening to podcasts and you're reading books, you will get far ahead of people. And I have people that text me all the time, call me all the time, ask me questions. And it's like, yeah, I just got this information because I read books. That's really it. And now it's like ingrained in me. So read books. Network is another massive thing you should do. Get outside your comfort zone. Go meet up with 5 people in your local community and talk real estate and talk about entrepreneurship. Talk about business, whatever you guys want to talk about. Smoke a cigar, have a bourbon, drink a mocktail, water, who cares? And if you don't have a local meetup, start one. That's what I did. And it's growing. You know, you just start marketing it, putting it out there. People love accountability, first of all, because they're, you know, with their peers. And then you could talk things outside of medicine. So I think networking and reading, listen to podcasts, probably the best things you can do. And one last thing I want to talk about is like compound interest, right? We all know what compound interest is. Albert Einstein said compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. And it is. We all know it in finance, right? It's like an exponential graph. Like you start investing early, that exponential graph will take off. And by the time you retire, you'll have a ton of money. Well, I think compound interest can also be talked about when we talk about education, when we talk about relationships, when we talk about working out and being in shape, your faith, all those things, it compounds on each other. The more you do it, the more it compounds. And so when I started this journey on real estate, when I really started like active real estate was November 2022 as I bought my first property. It was a burr, $75,000, put $40,000 into it and refinanced it and pulled all my money out of the deal. And then and at that time I said, I'm going to give myself 5 years. And in 5 years, I'll decide if real estate's for me or not. So it has not even been 3 years yet. And I've grown immensely. My net worth has grown. My passive income has grown. And it's all because of compound interest. Just doing it. What do we say? Consistency and discipline will take you places that motivation never can. So push yourself. Things compound, upon each other, and that will push you to do great things.
That's what I'm talking about. Makes me want to go hit the gym right now.
There we go, man. Yeah, I love it.
That's good stuff. Good stuff. Got to read good books frequently. Got to establish a nice network and take advantage of compound interest. You know, something funny that came to mind when you mentioned what certain people do on rest days versus other people. There's a funny joke. It's like rest days were made up by the successful people so that they can keep working while everybody's taking a day off.
That's right.
But of course, there is value in, a nice rest day from time to time.
Time to time, no question. You got to do it. But yeah, yep, you're right.
You do. So is it tough for you being a family man, working as a physician, and doing all these real estate things to balance family life on top of all this? What is that like?
That is a great question. And I didn't have a specific book for this, I don't think. Maybe Die with Zero, by Bill Perkins, like makes me think of that. And I think you brought that up, didn't you, during my last podcast with you? That's one of my favorite books. But intentionality, being intentional is the best thing that anybody can do. So I have a podcast. I do real estate investing. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I have a wife, a beautiful wife, and 3 young kids, 4, 2, and 7 months. I joined this year. I'm part of the Indiana Leadership Forum, which is young leaders in the community that we learn about, like local politics. I'm always intrigued. Not going to be a politician, but I'm intrigued by it. I want to learn more about it. I'm a spokesman for this commercial I told you about. All these things, I balance my time well. I have it all planned out. I know exactly when my week starts, what I'm doing that week, pretty much hour by hour. And I make sure I block off time for my kiddos. And I make sure that I'm there, present, without my phone. Wife, same thing. We go on dates. We're intentional with the things that we do so that I can do all the things I want to do. It's a lot, but I get up at 5 a.m., get my workout in before anybody else in the house is up. I work on, my podcast. I work on writing a book. I work on, anything and everything you want to do during that time. And then once the house is up, then it's mayhem, of course, right? So the biggest advice on that is just being intentional. Everybody can do it. There's 24 hours in a day, sleep for 8 of it, and then plan the rest of it. And if Netflix falls into that day, then fantastic. But otherwise, I like to read and be productive.
Awesome. Yeah, intentionality. I think Bill Perkins compares the opposite of that to just living life on autopilot. And he encourages us to really focus in on what it is we want to get out of life and to be intentional with each moment so that you can do all the things that you mentioned, for example. That's beautiful.
Now, let me add something really quick, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
My siblings just sent me a fun picture. So I know you're from Arizona. When I was in medical school, I did 3 months rotation down in Scottsdale. My parents had a condo there, so I lived there. And I already matched into ortho, so I was living it up, right?
Nice.
And so my brother and sister came down, hung out with me for a week or something like that, and there was a picture of us, and I looked huge. Like, I thought I was in shape. I played football and baseball in college. I went to medical school and just drank. Still probably worked out some, but not as much as I thought I was. And I look back at that picture, I'm like, whoa. I was out of shape. I was unhealthy. Excuse me. And now I barely drink because it throws off your day. Again, being intentional. I'm in better shape now. I just turned 40. Better shape now than I was at 26. And so again, it's all intentionality, and it's, making priorities. What are your priorities? And that's, everybody needs to decide that on their own, but there's a way to be busy and productive, and still live a purposeful and fulfilled life with your family. Yeah, it was like, puffy cheeks. I wasn't huge. I mean, I was 200 pounds, but more fat than I wanted, right?
And how tall are you?
When you're drinking a lot, I'm 5'10". I was drinking then, like socially, not an alcoholic, socially.
Sure.
But when you look back at pictures, you're like, whoa. At the time, I felt like I was in good shape. So anyway, it was just like a nice reminder to myself.
Yeah, there you go. No, sometimes you got to kind of wake up. I couldn't imagine you being fluffy, so glad you got back into shape there.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, awesome.
I'll give my wife credit.
Oh, hey, that'll help. Help. Well, now as we wrap things up here, you got any last pieces of advice you'd like to share? I know on your podcast, you like to ask your guests, what books they're reading, what advice they'd give to your 25-year-old self. So maybe just answer those questions here.
Oh, sure. What book am I reading right now? Gosh, I mean, I've read a ton of real estate books, but the one I really just read, and again, infinite banking is like a newer concept in my head. So I just read Being Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. Great book. If anybody's interested in understanding infinite banking, it sounds strange, but you literally can be your own bank. And you can listen to my podcast if you want to hear more about it, but it's interesting.
I'll throw a link in the show notes for that episode.
I think 25-year-old self, I mean, I pretty much just answered it, read a little bit less alcohol bottle and maybe more books on promoting, health and entrepreneurship. And I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, but I didn't know how to, what to do about it. Yeah. You know what, though, on the flip side, if I didn't party and have a good time and I was single, if I didn't do those things, would I always wish, like now I feel like I did all that in my 20s. I got that out of my system, right? I dated, I worked hard, but I, partied. And then I hit my 30s, I married my wife and did a lot less of all that. And now I feel content that, I'm living the dream life and I don't have to go back to that. So maybe there's a blessing in disguise on that one.
Right. Things just work out that way sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, folks, we've been talking with Dr. Kyle the Beast Stephenson. Dr. Stephenson, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate all your advice and to hear your story.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed or if you learned something, please drop us a rating wherever you listen, give us a follow, and share with your friends. It helps us out tremendously as we try to grow this podcast and reach more people with curious minds. Thanks again, and stay tuned for the next episode.